A couple years ago, I met a young man named Abu Bakr Khan. Speaking at an event called the Parliament of the World's Religions in Toronto, he told a story. December of 2016 is the coldest December in record or in recent history in Vancouver. And Abu Bakr Khan finds himself at a meeting at City Hall called by the mayor of Vancouver of diverse faith leaders in that city. The mayor begins the meeting with this line: "The morgue is full." So many street people had died in the month of December in Vancouver that it had dramatically stretched government services to the point of breaking. And the mayor literally didn't know who else to turn to except for the social and spiritual capital of the city of Vancouver, who were involved in a range of civic and human services activities. And Abu Bakr Khan narrates how rabbi after imam, after priest, after pastor stands up and basically reports what they're currently doing. And this 24-year-old figures out after about 10 minutes, this is not the point of this exercise, right? Clearly, not enough is happening. And he stands up, and again, at the ripe old age of 24, with no official position at the mosque, volunteers the mosque as a homeless shelter. He sits down, he thinks to himself, now I gotta go convince the executive board of the mosque to do this, because he was not their first choice as a representative to this meeting. He was like the fourth guy on the tree. He just happened to be free that night. And so kind of commences a really interesting narrative of interfaith civic leadership. The first thing Abu Bakr Khan has to do is to sit down with the executive committee and board of this mosque and tell them why they should do something that they had never done before. Somebody at this meeting says, this is our mosque, Abu Bakr. And Abu Bakr actually goes Quranic on him and says, actually, in the Quran, it says, the mosque belongs to God, and God loves all people, and that we are born with the breath of God, and our duty is to do mercy upon everybody. The classical Muslim scholars would say that those of you who are merciful to others on earth, the one who is in heaven will be merciful to you. There's not much argument with that amongst the board of the mosque, but they basically propose a reasonable regulation or stipulation. This has to be, whatever you do, it has to be under your supervision and kind of staffed at all times. And so from 7 p.m. to 8 a.m. every day for the stretch of that cold snap, they run a homeless shelter out of this mosque. And what's really interesting as Abu Bakr tells the story is that the people he gets to kind of staff this temporary shelter are his friends from all different religious backgrounds. Jains and Hindus and Buddhists and Sikhs and Baha'is and Christians and Jews. And kind of collectively, they figure out, when we all go to work in the morning, these people are still homeless. But we come from institutions and civic networks that can help. And while mosques might not typically be staffed during the day, churches are. So we'll figure out a system to get the folks that stay in our mosque overnight to this church. And synagogues oftentimes have kitchens. So we'll figure out a way where the synagogue prepares a meal to bring to the folks in this church so that the staff at the church aren't overtaxed. And they build, like on the fly, this set of 20-somethings, build this really important, like life-saving interfaith civic network. Abu Bakr Khan is not principally the product of liberal education. I do not say that to disappoint anybody, right? I say actually, in part, how education in many realms works, in business, in tech, in art, in writing, is to take a genius, somebody who didn't go to Harvard in that area, right? Somebody who figured something out in a garage or just kind of intuited and instincted her way into a new way of doing the novel, and to say, how do we prepare the kind of education program in which mere mortals, of which maybe the only one in this whole building is me right now, but normal people who are not geniuses can learn the kind of education, skills, knowledge, vision that this person instincted and intuited. So what did Abu Bakr Khan do that we might want other folks to do, that we might want to build education programs around? Number one, he had this kind of instinct for an ethos of civic action, right? His first instinct isn't, I'm gonna tell these people everything we're already doing. It's like, we gotta do something new, right? And even though my mosque hasn't done this before, I'm gonna figure out a way. I'm gonna put it on the table and we're gonna figure out a way. Okay, that's number one. Number two, he had a fluency in the language of a tradition that could move people to new action. In this case, it was Islam, but one can imagine this in Judaism, one can imagine this in America, one can imagine this in political philosophy. He had a fluency within the narrative of a tradition so that when somebody said, this is our mosque, we don't really do that, he could go to the text, in this case, the original text, like the real original text, and say, actually, we ought to be doing this, right? And the third thing was he could work across lines of difference in really positive, constructive, productive ways. I think that this is not a bad approach to thinking about liberal education in a diverse democracy. And I love the kind of AAC&U language of we prepare people to be leaders of unscripted problems in a diverse democracy, right? We are going to see more challenges like this. What are the ways that people can have an ethos of civic action, develop fluency, perhaps even mastery in a set of traditions so that they can move those people, whether it's Muslims or Americans, towards something new, and they have the knowledge and skills and comfort to work across lines of difference. So, I run an organization called Interfaith Youth Corps. We partner with college campuses and higher ed networks, Rich at CIC, Lynn at AAC&U, to in effect, help make more robust the dimension of diversity that, dare I say, America basically got right from the get-go, which is religious diversity. One of the things that we do in America, our founders, Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, is they build the first religiously diverse democracy. This political philosophers thought was impossible. Rousseau said, you cannot live with the one you believe is damned. And because of this ethos of religious tolerance, it facilitates what I like to call the American genius, which is that identity communities make social contributions to the civic whole. By the way, that's where American colleges and universities come from. They were at first built by religious communities principally to foster in their students an appreciation and mastery of that particular religious tradition so that they could go and be leaders in it, and they have become homes that welcome people of all different religious backgrounds. And kind of remarkably, in the diversity discourse of our day, which focuses on many important things, it does not have much of a focus on religious diversity. But as we saw in Vancouver, and this is more true in the United States, the nation with the soul of a church, right? Our largest repositories of social capital are in faith communities. And as America becomes more religiously diverse, that is going to be diverse social capital. It's not just going to be evangelicals and Catholics and mainline Protestants showing up to do volunteer work at the food depository. It's going to be Jains and Hindus and Buddhists. It's going to be Sikhs and Baha'is and Muslims. And we're going to have to figure out how to bridge that social capital in really positive ways, the way Abu Bakr Khan did. We are really proud to have had multiple grants from the Teagle Foundation that helps colleges and universities prepare, in our first grant, interfaith course sequences that help nurture the future Abu Bakr Khans, and our second grant to work with professional schools so that future doctors and nurses, future teachers and social workers have a knowledge base and skill set around religious diversity, and on our current grant to begin to bake this in to general education. Just like, any college president or provost or faculty member is thinking, how do we structure a core course in diversity? We think religious diversity has to be a part of this in precisely the way that Abu Bakr Khan was able to negotiate, navigate, and do positive things with the religious diversity. So, I don't think Ben Franklin said what I'm about to say, and it's questionable about whether he said what Andy said he said. I believe in a usable past also. But if I was around back in 1789, 1790, around the Constitutional Convention, and I was next to that woman who was like, what kind of government are you leading us? And Ben Franklin said, a republic, and if you can keep it, I would have said, what about the part about religiously diverse democracy? And Ben Franklin would have said, for Netflix, Franklin would have said, you think you have religious diversity now in late 18th century America? Just think about what you're going to have in 2019 and ask yourself the question, how do you make that the kind of religious diversity that serves American democracy rather than is a danger to it? Thank you.